Hi, Liz.
Good morning.
So what brings you here is the fact that you participated, you're an author in a study published by MIT that is looking at the future of the workplace and particularly the AI question. And here's what's interesting is I know I've taken part in a number of panels and debates where the headline story is really, oh my God, AI is going to destroy everything and take away jobs and the workplace will be decimated and workers will never work again. And it's really, really scary. And kind of the headline out of your report is basically not so fast. It's not necessarily that dire. That may not happen. Do I have that right?
I think you do, and I would,
First of all, that's a relief.
I mean, I'm going to give you, that's well said. But let me say, first and foremost, I agree with you that the fear and the fear is real, and the headlines are everywhere. For months, I've been driving to work with a billboard that says, "Robots can't take your job if you're retired." Mm-hmm. And I think in some ways that's in part the motivation for why MIT took on this task force, or why the president created the task force. If you're an institution in which technology is in your name, you better have a response to this concern about the future of work. We invent robots, but what does it mean for society at large? And I think when we took on the task force, or this challenge, we really wanted to bring in not just the roboticists and the computer scientists, but the economists and the political scientists and the anthropologists to understand really what's going on. And I think that has provided a little bit of a more tempered response. And I'd say we have what we call tempered optimism about the future. And I think that's grounded both in an understanding of kind of the complexity of both the development of the technology and the adoption of the technology. It's a little bit slower than we think, and there's no question robots have been coming. They've been coming for decades, actually. If we look at, the automotive industry has been adopting those for a long time. But now we're moving into different areas. We're thinking about collaborative robots, and so we're getting a little bit more sophisticated in how they can be used.
So you have this two-part message. Let's not panic and let's be smart about it. So just talk about the let's not panic part. I mean, what is the good news in this? Or what is the not such horrible
bad news? Right, exactly. Well, first I want to emphasize that, for Steve and Mary Kay and what they were saying about what the plight of workers for America, we absolutely come out and first and foremost say, people are concerned, and they're concerned for a good reason. It's not, this strong labor market does not belie the fact that workers have not shared in the productivity of the last 40 years with, basic, relatively stagnant wages. So that is a reality, and that is why people are concerned, despite what's going on in the labor market. I think there are a number of reasons why we feel like there are things we can do. I don't want to take away the sense of urgency, but there are things that are in our control. So first and foremost, technology is a tool. We develop this at MIT. We see how it can be used. And you can emphasize some aspects versus others. So the collaboration of the technology, we think, is much more powerful.
What does that mean?
So, for example, we talk about, instead of artificial intelligence, which I've always felt, is so alienating to us as a concept, augmented intelligence. Mm-hmm. So how are we using a lot of this?
Still would be AI, so.
I know, problematic. We're working on that.
Yeah.
How do we change that? But how do we use technology, and particularly the software-based, machine learning is what we really understand AI to be right now. Broad application, narrow in its kind of depth and what we can do with it. But it's really about, in that case, what we see is a lot of complementarity, particularly for the white-collar, higher-skilled worker. What we see is that this is a kind of technology that's going to help you figure out, like the radiologist, we always use that case, right? They're now not necessarily using, radiologists don't have to look at the imaging as much as they used to. It's not like we've gotten rid of the radiology jobs. There's the classic case of the ATM machines, right? We brought in the ATM machines, we thought we'd get rid of the bank tellers. We actually have more because we move people up to a higher value work. So we do see, while there's uncertainty as to how this will be used, we see a lot of opportunity on the AI side for complementarity. And again, where we choose to invest, what problems we take on, those are all going to make a difference in kind of how this plays out.
So what are some of the guideposts for that?
Well, I think there's first and foremost, I think people are thinking about ethical use of AI. I think we're trying to explain how things are used better. Mm-hmm. And I think that we're trying to find ways in which we're able to say, okay, here's here's the way this technology could be used in healthcare. What are the ways in which we see it applied in other areas, and how do we have this? How does this play out for different types of jobs and different types of workers? For example, home healthcare workers, which we know are going to be in huge demand going forward. The vision right now is not that we're creating AI that replaces the home healthcare worker. That's probably impossible, right? But we can imagine technology that's about helping physically move people. We can imagine something that's going to help with communications. We can imagine technology that's going to help you read the signs as to how somebody is doing. And that's about augmenting the work of the home healthcare worker.
I did an interview a few years ago with one of these sort of techno-futurist kind of guys who really annoyed me.
Let me know if I'm doing that at any point in time.
Not even close. But it was a question I asked him. I was talking about things happening in different fields, and I said, well, in the legal field, is the legal field something that's really very vulnerable to major disruption because of AI? And his answer was, duh. And there was almost a sort of glee in his envisioning of this disruptive future, because I think he felt whatever he was doing, he was going to be safe.
Yeah. Excellent. That's the kind of...
But there was a sort of zero-sum
Right.
kind of implication to the way he answered that question, is thousands of lawyers are going to be thrown out of work,
Yeah.
and lawyers won't happen, there won't be lawyers anymore, kind of thing. And I hear you saying that is way too stark a depiction of what's coming.
Yes, and I don't want to, I hope if there are any lawyers in the room, don't be offended, but I'm not so worried about the lawyers. I'm not. I'm not worried
Nobody
about them.
really.
Yeah,
No,
I think
I'm
they're going to
kidding.
be just fine. I mean, what that is doing is, it's basically getting rid of a lot of the, grunt work so that the people can be paid more to do
Right.
more of the more value-added work. I think, what we really need to be worried about are the lower skilled and moderate skilled workers. They are the ones who are bearing the brunt of a technological change.
Yeah.
And without the kind of investments in skills and retraining, et cetera, that's the group that's most vulnerable. And I think what we've seen over the last 40 years is that technology, along with globalization and trade, along with the decline in unions, all of these factors have led to this sort of loss of the middle. The middle skill job has sort of shrunk. So we have growing low skill jobs, we have growing high skill jobs. And the problem has been that the gains in the economy have largely been going to those who have a college education, 4-year college or higher.
Why is that? So we see productivity going up in general. And we also see productivity improving in places like Germany and European countries and in China, Japan, et cetera, without the same level of income inequality
That's right.
developing. So what are they doing that militates against this kind of separation of layers that we're not doing right?
That's right. And I think in some ways that's, that should be a cautionary and hopeful tone for us, which is to say it does not have to look like it does for us. All of these countries facing the same technological changes, the relatively same skill set, trade issues, and yet we can look just north to Canada. We can look to Japan, you can look to Europe. Their levels of income inequality are much less, and their levels of social mobility are much higher. If you were born in the States in 1940, you had a 9 in 10 chance 30 years later to have earned a higher income than your parents. If you were born in 1980, that had dropped to 5 in 10 chance in this country. And so what happens is that we just don't have the institutions that are there to buffer
What are
workers.
those institutions?
Well, Mary Kay was talking about, but sort of minimum wage, for example. I think that's important that we're seeing some of that. Earned income tax credit, if people are familiar with that, how to reward people who are working or support people who are working. Education that's affordable,
Yeah.
portable benefits and healthcare. All of those things provide a stronger safety net than we have right now for the lower skilled worker who is, really, right now what we're seeing is very few pathways forward for that worker in terms of rising skills. One of the points that also makes us, I think, a little bit more optimistic about what we might be able to do here is demographics. The fact is that we are an aging workforce, as they are in Europe and Japan, and we only have to look at Japan to understand our future in some ways. We have an aging workforce. We have declining fertility rates. We have cohorts that are becoming more educated over time. And we have restrictive immigration laws right now. And for all of those reasons, our challenge in the next 20 years is going to be a scarcity of workers. It's not going to be too many jobs. It's going to be too few workers. And the silver lining to that is that what happens over time is that lower skilled workers are going to become hopefully more educated if we do the right thing. And there aren't going to be so many workers for those low skilled jobs. And that's where automation actually might be our friend. We see it already in agriculture.
So as in agriculture, another field, you're talking, and I just want to let you know you can start putting your questions in through Slido, and I'm going to get to them in just a minute. As in agriculture, you are envisioning the possibility that robotics and AI can actually eliminate the jobs that really nobody wants to do. Nobody's doing them because they like them. And with education, everybody could be sort of better off. So, I mean, that's the most optimistic outcome that one can envision from the whole AI revolution, it sounds like.
Well, I don't think it's just about skill them and the jobs will come. Let's be clear that education in and of itself does not transform the system that we have right now. So,
why not?
Well, that's a supply side story. It's just as if if we just had the right skill set, everybody would have a job. We know that that's not the case, right? We've got all sorts of institutional challenges, from institutional racism to geographic challenges right now. All of these inequities that we're talking about are playing out geographically as well, right? So how are we going to approach places that are feeling left behind? But I think there's a lot of things. The tax policy. Tax policy right now favors investments in capital. You can get an R&D tax credit, which has been great for this country. Why don't we create something that's similar, that is about investing in human capital? Why don't we have something that's really about trying to think about workers and worker advocacy, I think, as well, as Mary Kay was pointing out, important. And then, of course, we're MIT. We're going to talk about investment in the technology, that we think that's important for us to be driving that and shaping it in the directions that we'd like to shape it in.
We have a question, universal basic income, yes or no? And again, Andrew Yang is proposing this idea. And does it sound like a surrender to say universal basic income is the solution because that means no work?
Do I get to answer just yes or no?
Sure. Yeah.
So my answer is going to be no on that one. I think it's a bit of, surrender is the wrong word. It's coming from the right place, which is to say we have a lot of economic insecurity and people who are living at the poverty line, below the poverty line, and how do we help those people? I think the challenge on UBI is that it's not changing anybody's opportunity set. It is making people perhaps feel a little bit more secure, and I'm not discounting that as important, but that's coming at an extremely high cost. If you really make this universal, it's $4 trillion a year. Mm-hmm. So then you're going to bankrupt the rest of our social safety net for this. I would much rather see us investing in supporting people in training, in their work through the earned income tax credit. I'd love to see us get broadband across the country. How about portable benefits? And there's a whole host of ways you could say we could be supporting workers and helping them. I think it's it seems to me a lot of people we get a lot of dignity from work. We find self-realization for work in the best case scenarios. Obviously, not all work does that.
You're right. The report begins with a quote, with a statement rather. Work is a central human activity critical to self-realization and social cohesion. So a future of everybody having leisure all the time to you is not a very lovely future.
I think it would be. I think it would create a lot of problems. I don't think it solves a lot of problems. But then I would also say it's kind of it's been the idea since Maynard Keynes in 1930 said, all this productivity, people are going to be working 15-hour work weeks. Mm. And it's never happened. And it doesn't happen in Germany, and it doesn't happen here. But you're also saying that's not such a great... I don't think people, I'm not sure any of us would like that. And when I define work, it could be volunteer work as well. I'm just saying work is essential to our identity. I think also what we know is that it's been very hard for people to sort of cut back on hours. People need hours. They want hours. Germany is, again, a case where often people have a choice, 30 hours, 35 hours, 40 hours. People choose to work more because they want to earn more. And so I think that's part of the reality. And then for those who are lucky enough to love their work and to get meaning from it, people are working because they want to.
What about workers who have been injured or workers with disabilities? Is there still a place for them in the future?
Actually, I would say, again, let's make a choice as a society and focus in on how technology can bring those with disabilities into the workforce better. I think there's so much opportunity there. And that's a choice we make as a society, how are we going to invest in that? So I think that's both a question of technology, but also a question of the social safety net. How are we supporting workers long term? This is sort of a sidetrack point, but a lot of workers obviously devastated by deindustrialization. And our response as a society was to provide some funding for training. But that runs out at some point, and there aren't a lot of opportunities, perhaps, as Steve was saying, different parts of Ohio. We need to invest in the communities, too. Like, we have to find a way to be doing this differently than we've done it in the past.
So be alert, think it through, stay calm.
There we go.
All
That's
right.
it.
Liz, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.